Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_daddy. I wasn't supposed to be here today. For lack of, long story short, I was at a 4-hour class today. And it was a very physical class. And I was like, you know what? I'm taking the day off. And my wife was giving me a ride home because obviously our car is dead again for the 50 billionth time. Anyways, and I told her, I'm like, I'm taking the day off. I don't think I'm gonna do anything. And then I thought about it and I'm like, you know what? I guarantee you the Packers did some stuff. I'm just positive. At the very least, the Rashawn Gary news came through. I go on Twitter and I scroll just a little bit and I just see Ken Ingalls listing off after they did this and this and this and this and then traded this and then brought in this and then did this and then they did this. And then now they're no longer cap compliant, which means they're going to have to do and it's like, oh my Lord. They did like 20 things, man. All right. I mean, I'm excited. I feel invigorated right now. I do. Nice long shower, fresh clothes, got a big old jug of coffee that has a really weird taste that I'm worried is like freaking coffee cleaner or rat poison. I'm not entirely sure, but it's got a really funky taste to it. So that's that. We'll see if I'm around tomorrow. But I'm feeling good. Long story short, I think this is probably going to be it. I don't know if I'm going to do Packernet After Dark because I was kind of excited about the whole not doing stuff thing. So let's go through some of the good stuff here. So why don't we start with the big news? And I haven't been marinating in this all day. This is brand new. So I see the news. I get it. As far as like digesting it and whatnot, I haven't fully done that. However, the headline here, the big news, we'll just start with the meat for once. Packers traded Colby Wooden to the Colts for linebacker Zaire Franklin. This is a straight player-for-player swap. It's a pretty rare thing. Now, my immediate thought before I went to PFF and looked at Zaire Franklin, listen, I appreciate Colby Wooden and all that. Our defensive tackle group outside of Wyatt is appalling. We tried to take Brooks and Wooden. We tried to move them inside, and I know they've had flashes, and I know the fans kind of like them because of those flashes and they do things or whatever. In totality, and again, I like them. I was optimistic that we can move them inside and it would work. It has not worked. It just hasn't. We also have to keep in mind that we have a new defensive coordinator, and that person came in and they looked at the situation and said, look, based on the way we're doing things, you have these guys that probably are not going to work for what we're doing, even less so than they have been. And also we're kind of missing this. But I mean, if you just look at run defense in 2025, it is shocking how awful. 8 different defensive tackles played for us. The highest of the 8 was Jonathan Ford with a 47 PFF grade. In fact, the highest overall grade was Devontae Wyatt, who had a 53 overall grade. Because despite having a 71 pass rush grade, which is great, he had a 38 run defense grade. Our defensive tackles, and maybe a change in scheme, maybe our we need to switch up our whole defensive line situation. I know we brought in some different things. We're going to readjust some things. Bomb was thrown. I got to stop having all these things on here at once. I'm trying to look at Packers news and there's people throwing bombs. Okay. Leaving aside the speculation that things can improve. And also, to be fair, Colby Wooden, probably our second best defensive tackle. Not that that means much, but he did play 18 games, which is more than everybody else. He had the second highest PFF grade at a 51. He had a 46 run defense grade, which embarrassingly is one of the best outside of Ford and Bohanna, who I forgot Bohanna existed, but those guys are, the big massive defensive tackle types. Not that they were good at it, but they were better than everybody else. And then as far as pass rush, he was also third. So he was third in both categories. He was behind Ford and Bohanna, behind the two big guys as a run defender, and he was behind Wyatt and Brinson as a pass rusher. But as far as the statistics go, he had 14 pressures and 0 sacks in 18 games. He had 315 attempts on the quarterback and sacked him 0 times. And his, 14 divided by, 315? So 4.44% pressure rate. These are appalling numbers. Appalling. And remember, for more than half the year, we had one of the best pass rushers in all of football creating absolute havoc. These guys should be feasting. And really nobody was successful on the defensive line outside of kind of Wyatt, who was at exactly 10%. So, this puts us in a slightly more precarious situation, but honestly, not really. I mean, we'll see what we end up doing, but do I feel like the drop-off from Colby Wooden to Carl Brooks is going to be somewhat devastating? No. Do we need to add to our defensive tackle group roughly as desperately as we did 5 minutes before this trade? Yes. It's also very important to note that Colby Wooden was used as a run defender. So if you look at defensive line alignments, you've got the A gap, the B gap, over tackle, and outside. So that's the way that they align these things. I think they have more granular things, but just on the main page here, A gap, B gap, over tackle, outside of tackle. The A gap would be the most inside. And so if we look at the A gap alignments, Quentin Bohanna, now these are not percentages. Bohanna didn't play a lot of snaps, but Bohanna's at 11, Brinson's at 17, Ford at 24, Riley at 28, Wyatt, who played a lot but is obviously not expected to be the most interior guy generally, 32 snaps, Nazir Stackhouse 43, Carl Brooks 45, Colby Wooden 168. So keep in mind, when you're talking about Gannon, and I swear, I talked about this before about how it's not necessarily big that makes you a good run defender or whatever, but I can almost predict the future. We are going to be drafting one of these 320-pound monsters, and it's going to be perfect for Gannon. Colby Wooden was, and again, this isn't necessarily percentage, but it doesn't necessarily matter. He played like 3 times more over the A gap than anybody else. He's listed at 273 pounds. Now, under Jeff Hafley, it's not that big of a deal because Jeff Hafley was big on what? Penetration. Get into the backfield. You're going to get past this guy and get to the running back behind there anyway. So being kind of a pass rusher type is that it's not a problem. That's not typically who you have there, but for Hafley it works. For Gannon, it really doesn't. Not that he isn't big on someone's at the front door. Not that he's not big on penetration. Obviously, look at what happened in Philadelphia with all the sacks. However, when you're talking about his defensive front, and this is where, the whole conversation between 4-3-3-4 doesn't matter because it's nickel or whatever, it kind of does because it goes to philosophy. With Gannon, you have more of a 3-4 true nose tackle. Even if there's 4 defensive linemen, you're still going to have one of those guys as a genuine nose tackle. Remember, we just talked about this yesterday in terms of the guy that got cut from Arizona. Who was that? Oh, Dalvin Tomlinson. And remember, that was his first year there. He was at Cleveland, and Gannon says, I want to go get Tomlinson. He's 6'3", 325 pounds. Now, at 32 years old, the guy was terrible, and Gutekunst is going to tell Gannon to go pound sand. I'm not bringing in a 32-year-old suck face. I wanted to go all kinds of terrible places there. I don't know why, but he's bad, and I felt angry about it. But again, it goes to philosophy. He's all about penetrators, but there's got to be that massive anchor. When you look at Arizona in 2025, Dalvin was not, he wasn't necessarily their maybe he was, I don't know. If you look at the A gap, who was number 1? Dalvin Tomlinson, the 320-plus guy. How about after that? PJ Mustipher, 315. right? So, I mean, these are not even the best. They didn't grade out the best in run defense, any of that kind of stuff. But it doesn't matter. It goes to philosophy. Who's going in the A gap? He's looking at the way we're doing things. He sees Colby Wooden in the A gap and says, no. Now, maybe he could have used him in a different way, but that completely changes the philosophy of the thing, where he becomes less valuable to us, whereas we can get more value in a trade by, for example, finding a linebacker that fits his scheme and moving on. Now, again, what does that mean? And it's funny because you look at the A gap after Tomlinson and Mustipher, which is 188 and 183 snaps. So what? I don't even know. That's a lot of snaps. The next is L.J. Collier. L.J. Collier is he's 291. He's a smaller guy. But his snap counts in the A-gap, 21. Basically nobody else. The A-gap is for the big boys, for Dalvin Tomlinson, P.J. Mustipher. Now, it's possible that we have those guys on our team, but I don't know that it's the right guys. Do we trust that Quinton Bohanna can be that guy? Do we trust that Jonathan Ford can be that guy? I don't know, and I think that they'll be here to compete. They'll be here as backups because you rotate these guys. Again, he had two. He had Dalvin Tomlinson and P.J. Mustipher as those anchors. But I have a feeling, especially in a draft class where everybody is 330 freaking pounds, this is the ultimate, like if it, the ultimate getting you a big old nose tackle draft class. I mean, I was kind of disappointed in it because I like the pass rushers, of course, obviously, you know what I mean? I mean, I did like the 320, 30 guys, but they just never seemed to pan out very much. So I don't know, I kind of got off that. But I can't help but assume this is lining up perfectly. So again, that's step one. Who do you have controlling your A gap? A 275-pound guy. Okay, no, he's got to go. Sorry, that's never going to work. What about 2024? Well, they had two main guys again. They had Roy Lopez, who was with Houston, and then he was with Arizona from 23 to 24, which means, because Gannon came in 2023, when he came in that first year, he went out and got this guy the first year he was there. He is a 318-pound defensive tackle. He's not 270 freaking 9. The other is Kairos Tonga. You can probably tell by the name. He's about 340. Those are the two guys that he had in 2024 running the show there. Well, what about the year before that, his first year? Well, we already know he had Roy Lopez, but who is that we assume the other guy? The other guy was Leki Fotu. Leki Fotu, 334 pounds. But what about Philadelphia? Philadelphia is a different story, right? Because they had all these guys on the interior that are, pass rushers that getting a billion different sacks. Let's look at Philadelphia in 2022. The number one guy that is over the A gap primarily was Linval Joseph. Linval Joseph is 329 pounds. The other guy is the freak himself, Jordan Davis, 336 pounds. And remember, they drafted him in 2022. So he was the defensive coordinator in 2021. That next year, what did they say? I want that 336-pound beast in the first round to come in here and be that anchor for our defense so the other guys can go eat. So he's always had this since he's been a defensive coordinator. 2021 was the only year that it was a little bit off. He comes in, probably just didn't have the guys, but Javon Hargrave was the main guy. He's still 305. It's not ideal, but again, what happens? Year one, Javon Hargrave, 305. 2022, in the first round, what do they do? What is the top priority? 336-pound beast to anchor that defensive line. In what year did they all explode with other sacks and everything else? It was 2022. I'm not saying Jordan Davis was the main reason, but 2021, they're trying to do all the things for Gannon, whatever. 2022, they build, and now it's starting to look more like a Gannon defense. And what do you have? Hassan Reddick with 21 sacks. Josh Sweat, 15 sacks. Brandon Graham, 14 sacks. Javon Hargrave, the guy that was the A-gap guy in 2021, now somebody else takes that role. He gets to feast a little bit, 12 sacks. Fletcher Cox, 9 sacks. Not to mention a billion pressures across this entire group. Hassan Reddick, 87 pressures on 512 attempts. Josh Sweat, 51. Brandon Graham, 55. Hargrave, 66. These guys were absolute frickin' menaces. Now, where's Jordan Davis? Frickin' stupid idiot Jordan Davis had 12 pressures on 128 pass rush attempts and 0 sacks. What a loser. What a stupid fat idiot. Bro, that's not his job. By the way, 72 run defense grade, which is pretty solid, but even if that wasn't necessarily very good, he is just consuming so much of that line and allowing these other guys to go in and do what they need to do. And it worked beautifully. Again, I'm not going to say Jordan Davis was the entire reason that everything popped off, but it got a heck of a lot better when it started to look a little bit more like a defense that Gannon really wants. So again, that's step number one. They said this guy ain't going to work. We know what direction they're going to go. They may do that in free agency. They're going to have to do some more things because right now they are no longer cap compliant. They will be very cap compliant very soon once the Rashawn Gary and Elton Jenkins news drops. Eventually, they're obviously not giving up on that. Again, my guess is Monday. We'll see. Hopefully, they're able to actually secure a deal. That would be wonderful. But if not, we're going to be very, very cap compliant, and we'll even have a little bit of money to spend. We'll see if they decide to go and do that and go get a defensive tackle. But again, it's a really solid draft class. Not that we can guarantee that they're going to fall the way that you want it to, but I think you're going to have some opportunities to get that boy that you need. And we'll talk about. I don't think we'll get to it today. Maybe that'll be a good thing tomorrow, especially if we end up doing a mock draft Monday. Maybe we can do like an all defensive tackle mock draft. That might actually be kind of an interesting little twist on it, just to kind of get an idea of the different options that'll be available at the different spots. I think we'll do that tomorrow, actually. So anyways, why don't we take a break here? That's, again, just kind of laying the groundwork for Colby Wooden. I like Colby. I always like Colby, but it just wasn't working, and it's definitely not going to work for this defensive philosophy. And so it made sense for us to move on, and great on the Packers to be able to get some compensation for that. Now we got to take a look at Zaire Franklin. And again, right from the jump, without even looking at his PFF stuff, what we know for a fact is that Gannon said, I don't need a Colby Wooden, I need a Zaire Franklin. So we got to figure out exactly what that means. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. And look at PFF, already got Green Bay up there. So Zaire Franklin has been 8 years in Indy. He is 29.6 years old. So right away, it is an unusual move for the Green Bay Packers. And I don't know necessarily if this is sort of a front and center thing. I don't know if this is a one-for-one swap with what looks like Quay is going to be leaving. Maybe it's the lowest level of compensation we could get for Wooden, and we'll try him out, and maybe he's going to be no good, and we'll just have somebody else, and we'll end up, trying to invest in the draft and all that kind of stuff, because it is relatively unusual to bring in a 30-year-old guy. Zaire Franklin is a 6 foot 235 guy. I will say this, though, that it's worth noting. If you remember when we talked about Gannon, what is Gannon's history? Gannon was Arizona's head coach. Prior to that, where was he? He was with Philadelphia. But he followed the head coach from Philadelphia from where? From Indianapolis. He was the DB coach, the defensive backs coach in Indianapolis from 2018 to 2020. Zaire Franklin was a rookie in 2018, 2019, and 2018, 2019, 2020, he was there. Now, he was not a pivotal part of this defense. He didn't really become a full-time starter until 2022, which was Gannon's second year in Philadelphia, but he does have 3 years of familiarity with Zaire Franklin. Now, let's get the ugly stuff out of the way. Outside of the fact that he's nearly 30 years old, and I'm sure many people will point this out to you, he got his first gig as the starter in 2022. So, first of all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years in before he actually gets a starting gig. That's not usually the most encouraging thing. He's a 7th round pick, whatever. But he did get the gig. He was given a 57 grade. The next year was a 61, then a 61, and in 2025, a 38. That's awful, right? Okay, let's look a little bit more. His coverage grades. This is by far his biggest weakness. 50, 56, 49, and 30. Awful. Run defense, not as bad. 65, 66, 72, and then this past year, 55. Everything took a dip this past year. There is some additional context here to keep in mind. Now, one thing I will point out to you, and this is true about a lot of different things, but I have mentioned before that specifically with PFF and linebackers, there are certain guys that have great reputations in the NFL, and PFF hates them, especially the smaller coverage space guys, which is not necessarily him, but I'm just making a point that there is basically an algorithm, and there are certain things that you maybe do that could be seen as a positive that that PFF doesn't necessarily care for. Let me give you a very specific example. If you are a tackling machine and you're a tackle first guy, and those tackles do not come behind the line of scrimmage, they do not come, at the line of scrimmage or 1 or 2 yards. It's more like 5-6 yards. But you are an absolute tackling machine. Nobody's breaking, big gains on you or whatever. You're not going to grade out very well. That's Zaire Franklin. If we're just being very blunt, he is a run defense tackle factory, think like Blake Martinez, that is not a cover guy. That's just not his MO. That's not what he does. Now, furthermore, as far as his complete fall off, yes, he got older, but this is clearly a massive, what the heck happened in 2025. He went from, he can't cover, but he's a good run defender. PFF doesn't love him, but he's average. It's fine. It's whatever. To this guy's appalling. It's one of the lowest PFF grades for a linebacker in the entire NFL. What happened? Well, there was a change in the scheme, and there was a change in what he was asked to do. This is a scheme fit issue. This is one of the biggest issues with scheme changes is I'm going to ask you to do something that just is not your thing. So in 2025, the Colts had Lou Anarumo. This is brand new, right? Lou Anarumo was the defensive coordinator for the Cincinnati Bengals from 2019 to 2024. He goes to the Colts in 2025. This is a change. So what I find interesting about this is we'll see how these guys end up getting used. I don't know exactly what Edgerrin Cooper's role is going to be in all this, but I'm kind of excited about this because it's kind of like I said with Hassan Reddick, kind of like being the Micah Parsons being the Hassan Reddick. We're slowly looking at, okay, what did they have in Philly? How do we get to Philly? Well, we got our Hassan Reddick. We have a significantly better version of Hassan Reddick right there. Great. What else do we have? We got this. We got that. Okay, we're working on it. So in Indy, what they had before Lou Anarumo was Gus Bradley. Now, Gus Bradley is not necessarily the same as Gannon. However, Gus Bradley ran a system kind of like Seattle's cover 3, and it's very simplistic for the linebackers. Because there's 3 guys behind you that stay in their deep shells, the linebackers' jobs are shed blocks, make tackles. Shed blocks, make tackles. Downhill, boom, shed the block, make the tackle. Shed the block, make the tackle. That's what your role is. And that's where this guy thrives. He's not massively athletic. He's not a cover guy. He's not any of those things. But in that kind of a system, he can make that work. Now, Lou Anarumo shows up in 2025, and he's much more complicated. This is sort of your mad scientist type of guy. We got these complex defensive schemes and systems. This is where you've got, he calls it the positionless or grizzly front, but you got defensive linemen dropping, linebackers dropping or blitzing. You've got all kinds of crazy stuff. And not only crazy, but you have to process more, you have to think a lot more, you have to know a lot more, and you have to cover a lot more space, which is not really his thing. He's not going to drop and cover a ton of space. He's not going to get to the quarterback in time when you send him on a blitz. Again, he's not an elite athlete. He's a Blake Martinez. Cut him loose and let him make tackles. And so where does that fit in with Jonathan Gannon? Well, like I said, it kind of harkens back to Philly a little bit. Who did he have in Philly that was somewhat similar? And to be clear, I'm not calling Zaire Franklin slow because he's not. He's just not one of those elite type of guys. He ran a 4.62 40, which is solid for sure. But who was the tackling machine in Philadelphia in 2022? It was TJ Edwards. TJ Edwards is very similar. He was an undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin, 6'1", 242, similar height weight profile. Late round, again, you got a 7th rounder compared to a UDFA. TJ Edwards, even less of an athlete. He ran a 4.87. In fact, his RAS score was a 2.75. You know what? TJ Edwards is a good freaking football player. In fact, he was at his best in Philly in 21 and 22. Go figure. He also had a good year in his first year in Chicago, but it started to fall apart after they moved in a different direction with the defense and everything. Go figure. These are guys that can thrive if they're in the right system and asked to do the right things. It's also worth thinking about, because we all love Edgerrin Cooper, and in our mind, Edgerrin is he's the main guy, so he should be the green dot guy and all that. They put Quay as the green dot guy, just kind of across the board. They just felt like he was the one that should handle that communication. What else is Zaire Franklin? He's the middle linebacker, the tackling freak, and the veteran that can handle that communication. He's a very intelligent guy that's been around for a long time. He can handle the calls from the defensive coordinator, get it to the guys, and understand what needs to happen. So he can come in and be the green dot. And so again, my immediate instinct, because I'm an idiot, is why isn't Cooper that dude? Like, Cooper's our star. Cooper should be the guy. He should listen. That's exactly what's going to happen. So the way that this works in Gannon's system, and a lot of systems like it in this sort of 3-4, 2 off-ball linebacker systems, is you've got a dirty work, the grinder, and then you've got the playmaker. It's actually very similar to what we just said about the defensive tackles. You get the big guy that gets he gets no glory. He's not going to get the sacks. He's not going to make the special plays. He's going to frickin' dig his heels in and make sure he doesn't get moved when 2 guys try to push him, and he's going to allow everybody else go out to make plays, and they get all the glory, and they get the big paychecks, when these are the guys doing the dirty work. Franklin's going to come in, again, assuming he wins the job and all that stuff, he's going to be the dirty work guy. Again, stack, shed, tackle. Stack, shed, tackle. He's doing all that stuff on the inside, doing the dirty work. Where does that leave Cooper? He is your will linebacker that flies around the field and makes frickin' plays. Franklin's going to handle all the communication duties. He's going to handle all the clogging duties. Cooper's job is to fly around like a heat-seeking missile psychopath and go make plays. If we're looking for that sort of comp in Arizona, he had Kaiser White. Nowhere near as good as Edgerrin Cooper, but in terms of roles, that was the role. In fact, funny enough, Kaiser White was in Philadelphia in 2022. When Gannon went to Arizona, he took him with. So he had 1 year in Philadelphia with Gannon, then spent 2 years in Arizona with Gannon. 2025, he goes to Tennessee, doesn't play, isn't good. The whole thing's a disaster. We're specializing. We're finding the right guys to do the job. Edgerrin Cooper fits perfectly. Whether Quay Walker would have or not is somewhat irrelevant. He probably would have been pretty good at that job, to be completely honest. I just think they can't really afford him, and so they're going to go in a different direction, a guy that can handle that work. And again, when you compare the trade, it's a very obvious win for the Packers as a player-for-player trade, and it might have been a win for the Colts too. I don't care enough to look into it. But the fact of the matter is, schematically, Wooden makes no sense. Zaire Franklin is a fit for what we're trying to do here. We still got to go find the big boy. I mean, we got a couple, but, we'll see. We'll see if we, I don't even know who's going to be on the team this next year, but we have some options. I think we need better options. So again, as you go through it, you can kind of see Edgerrin Cooper is Kaiser White. You've got Zaire Franklin, who's going to come in and be your TJ Edwards. You've got Hassan Reddick over there with Micah Parsons. He's had plenty of really good interior pass rushers that have done some damage. Obviously, that's Devontae Wyatt. You got the other pass rushers on the other side. You've got your 2 linebackers that he's got set up. We got to figure out the DB situation. Obviously, our safeties are pretty well set up, but we'll see what the differences are in terms of how he would use them compared to Hafley. The corners are going to be a major question. But it's just kind of exciting to see this all come together and go, okay, there's our TJ Edwards. I don't even want to say there's our Kaiser White because that's Edgerrin Cooper and whatever. And excuse me. And by the way, as I said, whether or not this obviously is not the long-term solution. So either way, it's worth considering in the draft as we look at linebackers. You're looking for, I don't want to say TJ Edwards because we're not talking about a UDFA with a 2.75 RAS necessarily, but you're looking for guys that fit that mold. TJ Edwards, Zaire Franklin, etc. Middle linebackers, dirty work guys. You're not looking for them to do coverage. You're looking for high intelligence guys that can be the green dot, that can handle the communication and do the dirty work in the middle of the field to allow Edgerrin Cooper to run free and do what he needs to do. So I'm happy about it. I think it's, again, if we just do PFF, it's we got rid of a bad guy for a worse guy. But I don't, obviously that's a little bit shallow of an analysis there. This is very obviously a schematic, and these things happen all the time. We saw that, what was it, Tennessee and the Jets did that same thing. They did a trade. It was all schematic. We got this big giant guy that doesn't fit. He's a good player, doesn't fit for us. So we're going to trade him away. He's got a lot of value because he's good. We're going to go get a really good pass rush. It was perfect for both of them. This is a much lower level of that, but it's the same thing. Hey, we got a new scheme. This guy doesn't fit. Oh, he fits our scheme. Send him over here. We'll send you this guy who doesn't fit our scheme. Perfect. 1-to-1 swap. Boom, done. I'll end with the point that I think it's possible Quay could have been a really good fit in terms of being a tackle first guy that you really don't want to use in coverage. All the frustrations that you have with Quay are kind of similar to what you expect to have in sort of this, just get in there and do the dirty work type of stuff. The bottom line, though, is Quay is going to get a massive pile of money, and I just don't really think it's worth it. Even if he's a slightly upgraded Zaire Franklin. Anyways, why don't we take a break? When we come back, I think there's a little bit more news we got to discuss, so we'll go over that and see what else has been going on. This is kind of where my head's been at on this trade so far, so we'll see what else is out there, and then we'll get out of here. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right, so that was the big news of the day. The other thing that happened today was that we did re-sign linebacker Nick Niemann to a 1-year deal. In an article by Justice Mosqueda, grading the Packers' offseason moves, gave an A for the Chris Brooks thing, C+ for the pick for pick. And then third is re-signing linebacker Nick Niemann. He says, this one's surprising to me because the Packers haven't typically kept 5 off-ball linebackers on their roster when they've played a 3-4 defense, with Zaire Franklin, Edgerrin Cooper, Isaiah McDuffie, Tyron Hopper, and now Nick Niemann. They have 5 rosterable off-ball linebackers, even if Quay Walker walks in free agency, which is now fully expected. Niemann was a true special teams ace, which is the important thing to keep in mind here. This is mostly a special teams play, I would assume. Contributing on everything but field goal team and field goal rush units, he was one of the best, if not the best, special teams player on the roster in 2025. Happy to see him back on a 1-year contract, even if he's basically just a special teams only player. He says that 5th linebacker spot under Jeff Hafley was really the only slot that the team had dedicated to a true special teams only guy. Mosby was a player in this mold too, but was only activated on a 53-man roster in Week 10, and I don't think the team is going to bring him back now that he's vested and his salary will be fully guaranteed. Okay. He goes on to say, I doubt he gets more than the minimum salary plus $500,000 roster bonus per game, signing bonus, whatever. So minimum salary, probably a special teams guy. It is kind of interesting, though, because any moves at linebacker means we're probably going to be moving on from someone. We're not bringing in 6. And that may be just sort of we're going to bring in too many people, obviously. And so, guys like this are, if we don't end up adding a linebacker, we'd be happy to have him as a special teams guy, at least, compete. And then we'll figure that out when we do our whole 53 thing. Maybe he won't make it. Maybe he will. It doesn't matter. And if you end up drafting somebody, maybe he's low man on the totem pole, and you just have to make that decision. So Niemann's going to be fingers crossed they don't draft any linebackers. And in addition, they're almost assuredly going to bring in linebackers as UDFAs. So there's going to be additional competition. Obviously, we could have a conversation about McDuffie and Hopper, but I know we have a new defensive coordinator, so maybe he's got his eye on some of these guys, is not liking them. McDuffie in particular. Oh, man, Khalil Mack signed a 1-year deal with the Chargers. That would have been a fun one. Tyron Hopper is a young, relatively early pick. I can't imagine Gutekunst would allow him to leave. I don't think he's going to do that. McDuffie, it just feels like the team loves that frickin' guy. So Franklin, I feel like probably isn't going anywhere. He could, it would essentially be the same as if we had cut Colby Wooden, but I don't think so. I think he's got a spot more or less locked up. Cooper obviously is not worth talking about. And then again, Tyron Hopper, I don't see that. And McDuffie would make the most sense to me But again, I just think Matt LaFleur freaking loves the guy. But if so that would be my thought, is that Neiman is, I would say, pretty unlikely to end up being on our 53-man roster. But we got to see about McDuffie and Hopper as well. At the end of the day, we're going to have, like with every position, too many people at that position. It's really just going to be a question of the competition. And if we end up drafting anybody, I mean, let's say days 1 or 2, certainly. Well, not day 1, day 2, certainly. There's no way they're going anywhere. But if it's a 7th round pick or something, they go on a practice squad. So all that to say, very minor move. This is one of the many things. We're going to bring in a lot of guys, and because remember, you got to get to 90, and then you cut it back down to 53. So there's going to be a lot of guys that are going to come in here. We're going to have too many guys at every single position, and then we'll start to go down from there. And yes, we have to pay them and all that stuff, obviously. That's just the nature of the business. But for all intents and purposes, Nick Neiman is a special teams ace. And again, I'd be very happy to have him. In fact, we have to remember, we don't just have a new defensive coordinator, we have a new special teams coordinator. And I think, the GM, at least in Green Bay, I can't speak for every other team. I'm guessing most are this way, though. One of the priorities is when you get somebody in there, they start to put together a little wish list, send up your Santa Claus wish list up to the North Pole. In this case, that would be the GM's desk. And you say, here are some things that I would need to get things going the right way. And so Neiman would be kind of similar to Zaire Franklin, honestly. It's not, some elite player, but he's solid. He's going to fit what you're going to be doing. And that, I would guess, carries a little bit of weight in terms of, if we're placing bets on which linebackers make it and which ones don't. I would think that that's going to be a more difficult cut than just saying, well, you're number 5, so you go, or number 6 or whatever. All right. I'll tell you what. Like I said, I'm pretty freaking beat down, and my stupid computer is just frozen all the time. Not completely frozen. Only if you want to switch tabs, open a new tab, or close a tab, or any of that kind of stuff. For some reason, it's being stupid. So I am going to leave it at that. And I'm torn on Packernet After Dark, but I think I'm going to give myself the rest of the day off. This would be for Saturday, so Sunday should be back to being a full slate. But I am out of here. You all have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.